Hey everyone, welcome to Massachusetts Sports Central. This is our NFL Power Rankings after Week 2 of the season. Alright, just to remind everyone what these rankings are. This is a list that represents how likely we think that each team is to win Super Bowl 52. It is not an ordered list of the best teams necessarily. It also isn't a random list based on who beat who last week. So be prepared for some 0-2 teams being ahead of some 2-0 teams. So basically, this is a list. This list is much less reactionary than many of these other types of power rankings. All right. Okay, on to the rankings. So at number 32, staying put, we have the New York Jets. Look, the Jets stink. They continue to stink until another team shows that they stink more. Their Jets are pretty much locked into number 32. They got killed this week. There's no reason to move them. Number 31, the Cincinnati Bengals, moving down 2 slots. They've been terrible this year. So they did not have the kind of turnover issues that they had in the first game, but they were still very bad. They couldn't do anything. Now, Houston has an elite defense, so the fact that they couldn't put up a ton of points in that is one thing. The fact that they couldn't get a touchdown in 2 weeks so far is pretty bad, though. They also, they didn't get lit up by the Texans, but, they were able to, their defense, which is the strength of the team, to give up some points. So, there's probably going to be some jockeying around in these high 20s, low 30s places, but right now the Bengals look really bad, and they have a very good chance of going 0-3 because I don't see them even competing with the Packers. Number 30, the Colts. Indianapolis moves up 1 slot. So they lost, but they lost in overtime. They were, competitive most of the game. Brissett looks a lot better than Tolzien. So, they have a little bit more of a chance going forward until Luck comes back. And again, we have no idea how long Luck's going to be gone. If he comes back soon, he is out next week, so that's big. But if he comes back, if he's back for week 4, maybe they can start moving up. But they could have already dug themselves in a deep enough hole that the playoffs might just be a pipe dream. Number 29, the Chicago Bears, moving back down 1 slot. They just got destroyed by the Buccaneers. So the little bit of goodwill they bought in the loss to the Falcons, where they actually were fairly competitive, totally washed away in how poorly they played in that game. I think that's a little bit closer to what the real Bears are. Especially, they have a lot of injuries. So, a team that was kind of had the deck stacked against them to begin with is now getting hit with the injury bug. I think that they are, it's a lost season. If they, I think at some point they probably go to Trubisky just to make sure, see if he can play. But I also can understand why they'd be sticking with Glennon for now. All right, number 28, the San Francisco 49ers. They actually moved up 2 slots, even though they lost again and are 0-2. So the offense stinks. It's really bad. I actually thought Hoyer would be able to put up I didn't think it was going to be great, but I thought he would put up reasonable numbers in this offense. But so far he's been terrible. He had 99 yards passing in the game this week. Now, they're playing Seattle, so I don't expect them to kill it on offense against Seattle, but they're doing nothing. And but the only reason I really haven't moved up, again, is more kind of the poor performances for some of the teams behind them. They were able to hold Seattle to only 12 points. Now, Seattle's offense seems like it's god-awful, but, decent defensive performance. So, moving on, number 27, Cleveland Browns, same spot they were last week as well. Browns lost again. They were somewhat competitive with the Ravens in the first half, but Baltimore pulled away a little bit late. In a very Brownsy move, Deshaun Kaiser had to leave the game with a migraine. Not making fun of him for leaving with a migraine. I know those are serious. They hurt. There's no way, if he really had a migraine, there's no way he would be able to competently play. However, I'm just pointing out that it's a very Browns-like thing to have your quarterback come down with a migraine in the middle of the game. All right, next up we have the Buffalo Bills at number 26, moving down one slot. They lost their game, so they are also 0-2. They were playing the Panthers in a thrilling 9-6 game. So obviously they were competitive. They had a chance to win it right till the end. As we're going to see in not too long, I'm not that high on the Panthers. So obviously the defense, not bad. Obviously pretty good, though I do think some of that has to do with lackluster offenses that they've faced so far. But, again, can't knock them for not giving up very many points, even if they are losing. I think the passing attack is gonna continue to be terrible all year. I think they're gonna end up being a decent rushing team again, but I don't think the defense is good enough, and I don't think running the ball well enough is going to be able to save them. They're better than the Jets, and they'll finish ahead of the Jets, which will artificially keep them probably a little bit higher than some teams throughout the year, just because, again, remember, this is based on how likely you are to win the Super Bowl. So a third-place team is a little bit closer to doing that than a fourth-place team, even if the fourth-place team in a different division might be a little bit better. All right, number 25, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Moving down 2 slots. So last week, I stated I kind of didn't really believe in the Jaguars. Now, I was impressed with their defense, and I was thinking that, maybe they really did pull it all together. But looking at what happened this week, Tennessee absolutely destroyed them. They put up tons of points. So, still, the jury's still a little bit out on the Jaguars' defense. Now, after seeing how the Texans played in week 2, I feel kind of confident in saying that it was just as much a bad Texans offense as it was an amazing Jags defense. And because they weren't able to dominate so quickly and score on defense and hold the opponent's offense to absolutely nothing, Bortles was forced to actually have to try to play, and that is going to be something that will kill the Jags each and every time if that continues to happen. He had 2 picks and lost fumbles, so 3 total turnovers. A lot of his yards and his lone touchdown were garbage time. So until they solve their quarterback problem, they are not going to be very good. Next up, we have at number 24, the Arizona Cardinals. This is the same spot they were last week. Frankly, this has as much to do with the fact that there's the poor play behind them than them being good, because I would definitely have moved them down even though they won the game, because they just beat a lousy Colts team, and they had to do it. They had to come back to tie it and then get into overtime, and they almost blew it anyway. David Johnson was a huge piece of this team. I don't think that surprises anyone. I think that this is showing the end of the first game, and then this game is showing how overly dependent they were on him. So until he comes back, or they find a way to work around his absence, this is going to be this team is not going to score many points. They have a good defense, but I don't think it's good enough to be able to make up for how bad the offense is going to be. I'm also not sold on Palmer. He hasn't been very good this year, and he's injury prone, so I'm expecting him to get hurt at some point, especially since they don't have David Johnson to be able to run the ball. So the Cardinals could find some magic, but I'm thinking they're more likely to fall down than to move up. All right, number 23, our first 2-0 team, the Carolina Panthers. As I mentioned not too long ago, we were going to be talking about them soon. This is actually a 3-spot drop, even though they won again and they're 2-0. Remember, this is so they actually, I probably have them a little too low at this point because they are 2-0. So that puts them in much better position than a lot of other teams. However, they beat 2 lousy teams. They did spank the 49ers in the first week, but they barely beat a mediocre at best Bills team. Their offense has not gotten very much done, even though they scored a lot of points first week. Not a lot, but they scored a good amount of points the first week. The offense was not that impressive, and then they were god awful against the Bills. I'm not believing in the Panthers at this point. Maybe Newton will turn it around. Maybe McCaffrey will be able to put up some bigger numbers, but so far he's been more or less contained. Newton hasn't done anything special, and I'm not high on anything else on that team. Defense is decent, but other than that, There's not much to hang your hat on. Like I said, I probably have them a little too low at this point, but I'm gonna guess that they're gonna start losing some games pretty soon. Number 22, we have the LA Rams. I've said it before, I was really, really low on the Rams coming into the season, but they moved up a few spots last week, and even though they lost, I moved them up 4 slots this week. Again, not necessarily because they're awesome, but like, they're playing reasonably well, but a lot of other teams are playing just really, really badly. So I moved them up. They are, or they, excuse me, they were having trouble with the Redskins early in their game. They could have just like gotten blown out, but they actually battled back and made the game pretty competitive for the most part. I'm also not saying that at this point Jared Goff is living up to his draft status, but I also think that he is, even just these 2 games, he's showing that he's probably at least not a total flameout bust. And I think he is moving in the right direction. He could very well be a good quarterback, but like I said, I'm gonna make it more than 2 games for that. But he's already probably outperformed Ryan Leaf and Jamarcus Russell and some of the other like god awful, super high high first round pick busts that he was being compared with at the end of last year. All right, next, number 21, the New Orleans Saints. Here's a pure moved up 1 slot because of the poor performances behind them, because they got spanked by the Patriots. Both sides of the ball. So not shocking. The Saints defense is bad. People were hoping it was going to be better, but so far it's been terrible. So not too surprising that the Patriots were able to torch them for a bunch of points. What is more concerning is the offense has not been that impressive so far. I think the Patriots defense is pretty good, or should be pretty good, but obviously they got killed by Kansas City in week 1, and they didn't actually look that great in preseason, and they've definitely been tinkering a lot. So they were ripe to have the Saints be able to get something going, but they really were not able to. Even if the defense is a little better than it's been in the past couple years, if the offense isn't still putting up like high 20s points minimum, they're going to have trouble. So if they're only going to average like in the low 20s for points, this team could be significantly worse than I was expecting. More or less, I was expecting them to stay on their typical 7-9 trajectory. Number 20, the LA Chargers, another 0-2 team. I actually might say that they could possibly be the best 0-2 team, but they're still 0-2. Again, I actually these guys I probably got a bit too high at this point. If they lose again, then they're going to go crashing down the list quickly. Because again, remember, likelihood of winning this year's Super Bowl, they are currently in 4th place and 0-2 with all 3 other teams in their division being 2-0. And they've already lost head-to-head to one of them. And going into this week, they're playing KC, who we are not going to talk about for a while, because they're good. So if they lose to KC this week, they could be, very realistically, they could be 0-3, with KC being 3-0 with a head-to-head win already. And both Denver and Oakland have very winnable games. So conceivably, they could be 0-3 with all 3 teams being 3-0, and like you could they'll be 0-3 in the conference, 0-2 in the division. So having those head-to-head losses to 2 of those 3 teams already. And they also lost to Miami, where Miami is going to be probably one of those, wild card bubble teams, which is really, even at this point, is probably the best chance that the Chargers have of making the playoffs. So they already are in the tie-breaking hole there too. So if they lose next week, especially if the other teams in their division win, they are going to plummet pretty quickly. Really, if there's a must-win game for any team, it's going to be that one, because their season will be pretty much over if they lose next week. Number 19, the Washington Redskins, +2 from last week. Decent team. I still have them as the worst team in their pretty good division. They look pretty good against the Rams. I'm still not sold that, as I was saying, I'm still not sold that the Rams are like a good team. I don't think they're. I'm buying that they're not as bad as I thought they were going to be. I think I had them as like a 2-win team. I don't think they're going to be that bad at this point. Obviously, just be hard to only win one more game at this point if they're actually being somewhat competitive, especially given that they play some terrible teams still. Um, but sorry, this is about the Redskins though. The offense looked pretty good early, but they stumbled a little bit, turning some good drives into points. Um, Defense also looked pretty solid, but they did end up giving up points to the Rams in the end. Um, the Skins can still do something. I still think they're probably the worst team in the division. Not the yeah, in the division. Um, but that could change pretty quickly if the Giants keep on their current skid, and the Skins can turn some stuff positive going forward. Number 18, the Baltimore Ravens. Same slot I had them last week. They are poised to maybe move up if they keep it going. They have won 2 games. They have won both games reasonably convincingly, but they've also played 2 of the worst teams in the league. The offense has not looked like anything special in either of those games, and now they lost Yanda. Marshall Yanda is one of the better offensive linemen, arguably the best guard in the league. And one thing we're definitely seeing this year is if you have a poor offensive line, you're going to have a poor offense. So an offense that was already kind of questionable, losing their best lineman is not a good thing. I'm not going to say it's like a crushing blow, but it is definitely something that stacks against them. So we'll have to see how that ends up playing out. Number 17, the Minnesota Vikings. This is an 8 spot drop from last week. This does not have nearly as much to do with the loss to the Steelers as it does to Sam Bradford's injury status. I expected them to lose to the Steelers. I did think the game was going to be more competitive, but I also assumed that Bradford was going to play, and it would have been nice to see how real the offense was after the big game they had against New Orleans. As we stated a few minutes ago, New Orleans defense has been terrible. And the Vikings are no Patriots on offense, so it would have been nice to see what happened. If they actually had a real quarterback. Instead, they had Casey Keenum, who's like a below-average backup quarterback. So if he's going to be playing a lot, then this is going to be tough for a team that could have been pretty good. The defense is still solid, but like I said, they're being very vague on what's happening with Bradford. They're like, oh, he might miss 1 game, he could miss 6. Well, if he's back in week 3, then this was a little too reactionary, and they will probably move back up pretty easily. If he does actually miss 6 games, then this team is done. They're going to be, they'll be lucky to end up in the above 25 in the end. All right, next we have at 16, the New York Football Giants, moving down 5 slots. They got nothing done against the Lions this week. So even with Beckham back, now he didn't look like he was at full strength, but he was back. The offense still couldn't get anything. As we were mentioning in the Ravens thing, poor offensive line means poor offense. Their offensive line is pretty bad. Eli is not looking like the 2014, 15, whatever. He was good a couple years ago. He's not looking like whatever year that was. I'm blanking on it right now. Eli, that was pretty good. He's looking more like the Eli of last year, which was mediocre at best. He might even be a little bit worse. And outside of Beckham, they don't have anything. Marshall has been a huge disappointment so far. No running game. Just the defense is good. The defense will carry them a bit. But you got to have. They're not historically good, and the way this offense is playing, you got to have like the 2000 Ravens, the 2002 Bucks, the 2015 Broncos type of defense to be able to carry this bad of an offense. So moving on, number 15, the Miami Dolphins. Had their season opener. As I said last week, I felt I didn't like moving them down a couple of slots like I did, so they basically moved back to where I had them before. Nice that they were able to come back and hold on to the win against the Chargers. Chargers are decent. Like I said, probably the best 0-2 team, though I have the Giants ranked ahead of them, but that has a little bit to do with the division setup and the fact that all the other teams are 1-1 as opposed to 2-0. Anyway, Dolphins, I think they're going to be decent. It's hard to take too much away from this game since they only played one so far. But they have them on the playoff fringes, and I think that's where they're going to be all year. Number 14, the Houston Texans. This is a 4-point drop. Defense still looks good. Offense still looks terrible. The line was bad. Deshaun Watson is still raw. Didn't look that great outside of like his touchdown run. He definitely needs to improve, and they gotta get their left tackle who's holding out. They gotta sign him, and they got to improve that line because right now the kid's gonna get killed, and there's nothing they can do about it. Next, we have at number 13 the Detroit Lions, moving up 3 slots. Kind of like this team. The defense is a little bit better than I was expecting so far. Offense is doing more or less what I expected. They weren't able to put up a ton of points on the Giants, but the Giants are one of the best defenses in the league. So Stafford was able to do enough. He played well. He did what he needed to do. Scored enough points. The defense was able to stop a mediocre at best offense. I think they're a decent team. I think they're gonna. I had them on the fringes of the playoffs in my preseason picks, and that's where they are right now. Now, especially if the Vikings start to fall apart without Bradford, they could definitely have a stranglehold on at least the second slot, if not even challenge the Packers for the top slot in that division, and could win a couple extra games if they were able to take out a decimated Vikings team at some point. All right, next, number 12, the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys were absolutely killed by the Denver Broncos in Denver. That's not the weirdest thing in the world, but it was still enough for me to move them down 8 slots. So originally I actually picked against them in my season previews when I thought Zeke was going to be out for this game. When he was there, I actually changed it, and this was my worst game pick of the week. I only lost 2, and this was one of them. So the only concern I really had with the Broncos on defense was their running defense because they were bad last year. So I was figuring with the best running back from last year playing that they were going to be able to run the ball at least. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win, but they could at least run. But they had Zeke have by far the worst day of his career. So is that concerning for Zeke, or is that just showing how good Denver is? Time will tell. But given that they didn't put up big numbers against the Giants defense, which, again, one of the better defenses last week, it's kind of hard to see where the offense is on this team so far. The defense, a lot of guys hurt, and it's hard to say. Like, the Denver offense has looked better than expected up to this point. But again, is that just because like the Cowboys defense was so bad? And the Chargers are good, but not like elite from week 1. So the Cowboys are definitely kind of going to be they're going to be the highest team probably that I have at this point, who's going to be all over the place on more of a week to week basis because I just don't know what to think of them at this point. Number 11. We have the Philadelphia Eagles moving up 4 spots, and now the number 1 team, in my opinion, for the NFC East. They did lose their game against Kansas City, but Kansas City is a very good team. They were leading at points and were competitive throughout. That, along with the nice performance they had against Washington in week 1, I think that they're showing that they are a legit contender. And with both the Cowboys and the Giants faltering, they could easily take this division. I had them being competitive even before this. The other 2 teams had a rocky start, so I would not be shocked at all if they end up on top in the end. Number 10, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is up 3 spots. They were playing the Bears. The Bears stink, but they killed them. They won. They only gave up 1 touchdown, more or less garbage time. They probably could have had the shutout if they played for that, which obviously you never want to do that specifically. Offense and defense both look good. This was only the first game, so it's hard to say, but I expected them to be a good team, and they came out and looked great to start, especially if you take into account the fact that the Bears gave the Falcons everything that they could handle in week 1. So, the Bears looked a little bit better than I was expecting to start off. But yeah, I like the Bucs, and think they're gonna be a good team this year. All right, number 9, the Seattle Seahawks. They're moving down one spot, even though that they won. The offense is scary. So the offensive line stinks. That is hampering everything else they can do. The running game is mediocre at best. They're similar to the Giants. They have a better quarterback and a better running game than the Giants do. And that's not saying much on the running game side, but they definitely have a much better quarterback. And so they have a little bit more potential on offense. And their defense, as good as the Giants' defense is, I think the Seattle Seahawks are better. So slightly better defense, much better quarterback, probably slightly better overall offenses. That's really the only reason I have them. They're similar teams at this point. And really, to some extent, you can throw the Texans in there as well. So you have 3 elite defenses with 3 horrible so far offenses. So, as I said, the Seahawks have been there before, and they have the best quarterback of that group. At least at this point, maybe Watson will turn out to be great, but no, he ain't there yet. Excuse me. If they can solve some of their offensive problems, they're going to move back up to the the top of this list where where I would have expected them to be. Number 8, the Tennessee Titans. Titans killed the Jaguars. Obviously, that's not in and of itself necessarily that impressive, but since the Jaguars did look so good on both sides of the ball in week 1, I guess they looked really good on defense. They were at least competent on offense, but Titans shutting them down overall. And that was Mariota didn't even have to have a huge game. And I think he's a good young quarterback, so I expect him to be better at some point. So the Titans, I like their defense, I like their offense. I expected them to be good. They lost to the Raiders in week 1. That's that's a forgivable sin, definitely. So next up, we have the Denver Broncos, up 7 slots from last week. And that was after making a little bit of a move in week 1 and 2. So the Broncos, obviously you have that elite defense, and as I was saying in the Cowboys blurb, really the only issue they had last year was they were not great against the run last year, which was a difference from 2015. But so far, obviously, with the domination of Zeke, that was very impressive, and they didn't have any trouble with the Chargers in week 1 either. So at this point, it looks like maybe they solved that problem. If they solve that problem, then they are a danger. Then they're at least close to the 2015 defense that was talked about as an all-timer. And the offense has looked surprisingly good. Now again, is that poor defenses, or is it them really being good? I think it's probably a little bit of a combination of both. But so far, the offense is definitely outperforming anything that I expected. And if the defense is really this good, they don't need to have like a top 10 offense. They just need to have competent quarterback play, a decent running game, which that's what they have so far. Good above that so far, but that's all they really need to have to be a serious contender. Number 6, the Green Bay Packers. That is down 3 slots. They got killed by a lot more than what that score looked like by the Falcons. There was the Falcons had a 24-point lead, I believe, going into the fourth quarter. Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback, but if you just look at his numbers, you're like, well, he had a good game. He had a lot of pure garbage time stats. He had almost half of his yards and both of his touchdowns when the game was more or less out of reach in the fourth quarter, to make it just a 2-score loss. So they did have a lot of injuries, but if those injuries continue, then that's going to hamper them continually. Defense, now we see that the Seattle offense might be actually really horrible. So the fact that they played so well against them in week 1 is less impressive. And when they played an elite offense like the Falcons, they got killed. So I still think that they're a good team. They'll be competitive, but we have to monitor what's going on with the defense and what's going on with the injuries. Number 5, the Kansas City Chiefs up 2 slots. 2-0, 2 pretty good victories over 2 pretty good teams. I think they're going to be hovering around the top of the list most of the year. There's not too much else to say. I'm still worried about the Berry injury because he was obviously a huge part of that defense, one of the better players in the league. But we'll have to see how that plays out. But so far, 2-0, 2 quality wins. Can't complain about anything with the Chiefs so far. Number 4, we have the Oakland Raiders up 1 slot. This has more just from has to do with more of the Packers falling than anything else. Obviously, they're 2-0. They won their game easily, but they beat the Jets. So, I mean, that's like a high school all-star team. So moving up 1 slot, it will be nice to see what happens when they start getting into some of the division games with the Chiefs and Broncos being so good so far. That will be interesting to see, and that will definitely show who's the cream of the crop in that very good division. Number 3, the Atlanta Falcons up 3 slots. So basically they flip-flopped with the Packers. The Packers got killed by them. The offense was able to put up points like pretty much at will. And then the defense also did a very good job of stopping the Packers prior to garbage time, as I was saying before, giving up a couple of touchdowns in the fourth quarter when they were up 4 scores. I mean, the offense looks like it's going to still be good, and the defense looks like it is improving as it was at the end of last season. I think this is going to be a really good team. So far, no semblance. You could say maybe they looked like a little bit of the Super Bowl hangover, like keeping the Bears in the game in week 1, but they still ended up winning, and clearly they snapped out of that in that game against Green Bay. I expect them to be one of the top teams in the NFC this year and stay that way all year. Number 2, staying put, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I have not been overly impressed with the Steelers so far. I still think that they are probably the second best team in the league, though if they don't show me a little bit more, and teams like the Falcons, Raiders, Chiefs, etc. keep playing well and looking good every week, they could definitely end up moving down. If they come out with, but if they start coming out with big games and looking super impressive, then that won't be the case. And number 1, again, the New England Patriots. Obviously, if I didn't move them down after that pretty bad loss to KC in week 1, I wasn't going to be moving them down with an impressive win over New Orleans this week. Brady apparently had never thrown for 3 touchdowns in the first quarter before. Kind of hard to believe, but that was a career high for him in this game. He also threw for 466 yards, which is the 3rd most he's ever had in the regular season, 4th most in his overall in his career when you include playoffs as well. He set the record apparently for most games with at least 3 touchdowns and no interceptions with 52 in this game. But also going back to those yards, everybody's saying, oh, he looks so old, and maybe it's the beginning of the end after week 1. If you look at either side of that game, so the Super Bowl at the end of last season and this game, he threw 2 of his 4 most yards ever in a game. So, maybe, just maybe week 1 was a little bit more of the aberration in his performance as opposed to those other games. Anyway, so like I said, obviously if these other teams keep playing well and the Patriots stumble past how they played in week 1, somebody can move up. But the Pats got to show me that they are not the favorites before somebody's gonna overtake them. All right, so we'll be back next week with our rankings after the week 3 games. Thanks for watching, and please like, comment, and share the videos, and subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on other social media. Facebook and Twitter are both @MA Sports Central. Thanks, and we will see you soon.